How's your spring break?
My spring break was great. I went to Austin, where it was in the 70s and 80s every day.
Nice.
It was very nice.
I've never been to Austin. I've never been really west of the Mississippi. Well, I guess I lived in Mississippi, but I haven't been west of that.
Well, you have, you're young. You have plenty of time to remedy that.
Yeah, it's on my bucket list to make it out to Yosemite or Yellowstone sometime, so I'll get there.
Do you know sign language, Megan?
I don't know.
I was hoping you could help Aaron out here. Heather!
Hey!
Where are you, Heather?
Oh, I'm in the room where the comfy couch is. I'm just in a different chair.
Oh, I didn't know there was one.
Yep.
You don't feel like being comfy tonight?
No, I do. My phone is charging, so I have to move and not being comfortable in order for my phone to be alive.
Oh, Donald is here tonight. Awesome.
Hello.
Hello.
So apparently I've been slacking because I did not realize that we had an assignment due this Friday, by the way.
We don't.
Oh, well, cool. Then I'm not slacking.
Until I assign it, it's not due.
Fantastic.
So we're going to decide tonight when we want it to be due.
Sounds good.
And Henry's trying to join us. He's not in yet, so we'll give him a minute.
I have a question about the chapter 9 reading. Where do I find that?
Sure. What are we what?
The
Oh.
chapter, yeah.
Yes. That was a plan that did not come about. So just go to the modules.
Okay.
Let's see, who else is that? Somebody. Kim. Hey, Kim.
Hi.
It wouldn't be a hangout if Kim wasn't here.
Thank you.
All right. So did, I know some of you didn't have a break last week, but hopefully the rest of you did. Heather, did you have a break? Heather is frozen.
I had a little bit of a break.
Good.
I had strep throat, so it wasn't that good of a break.
Well, that's no good.
No. It was going around, so it was my turn to get it, I guess.
Okay. Well, I don't know if Henry's going to make it. He tweeted and said he was trying to get in, but was having trouble with his phone. So I guess we will just launch into this. Worst, let me see, Aaron, you can always watch the video. Okay, we are now heavy into the theory of the firm. This is fairly technical stuff. We started the week before break with the theory of cost, production and cost. And we learned what the cost curves look like. The good news is the cost curves are the same regardless of what kind of firm you're looking at. There are two small exceptions to that, but don't worry about those for now. So for example, average cost curves are always U-shaped, and marginal cost curves always look like a Nike sign. And I'm going to show you some examples of those soon. Okay, so what we learned that week or in that module, you're going to be using over and over again, and eventually it'll make sense to you if it doesn't already. All right, so I hear somebody. Okay, never mind. This week is the first of 3 weeks where we're going to do the same thing over again, but with a different market structure. So this week we're looking at perfectly competitive firms. Next week we'll look at monopolies. And the following week we'll look at everything in between, what we call imperfect competition. So again, it's graphically intense, but we're going to be doing it 3 times at least, and so you will pick it up. All right, let me show you some pictures here because I have them, so I might as well. Let me share my screen. Let me find the pictures. All right, can you see the table on the left and the graphs on the right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So perfect competition is one extreme case of market structure. Okay, it's the case where there are many buyers and sellers, and so no one buyer or seller has any market power, any ability to influence the market price. Next week, when we look at monopoly, you'll see the opposite case. Okay, but for now, all the firms are small, and so no one firm can do anything to influence the market price. So this is a good news and bad news story. The bad news is perfectly competitive firms can't influence the market price in any significant way. In other words, if they try to charge more than any other firm will, they will immediately lose all their customers. And so it wouldn't make any sense for them to do that. On the other hand, the good news is they can sell all they want as long as they charge the going market price. Okay, so what we're going to show in a few minutes is that this means that the demand curve that a perfectly competitive firm faces is a horizontal line at the market price. So they can pick any quantity they want from 0 to infinity. Well, not literally infinity, but they can sell a small amount or a large amount, and the price they charge and the price they receive will just stay at the market level. Now, what that means is in the graph here on the right-hand side, perfectly competitive firms have total revenue curves that are straight lines. That's the red line here. If you think about it, you know, suppose the price is $5 per widget. If they sell 1 widget, they get $5. If they sell 2 widgets, they get $10. If they sell 3 widgets, they get $15. And so the slope of this red line here is actually going to be the price, okay? So revenue is pretty easy. The more they sell, the higher their revenue is going to be in this case, okay? Now, if you think back to the cost curves, what you see in the blue line here is a very normal looking total cost curve, okay? As you increase your output, the cost goes up, first at a diminishing rate, but then as you try to produce more and more, the costs really accelerate and get out of control. Since we're assuming that the firm is trying to maximize their profits, they want to operate where the total revenue curve is furthest above the total cost curve. So what that means is for sure they're going to be in this middle range. Okay, any level of output, and the horizontal axis here is quantity of output. Okay, so this is a break-even point where revenues and costs are equal. If they produce any quantity less than that, they're going to be losing money. And the same thing is true here. Here's another break-even point. Okay, if they produce any higher quantity, they're going to be losing money because in both cases, the costs are going to be above the revenues. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so to make it easy, I actually graphed profit, and that's in the little green line here. So what you can see is on either side of the two break-even points, the profit line is actually negative. So they're actually losing money there. Okay, now when we talk about producer equilibrium, and we're going to talk about producer equilibrium, we're really asking the question, what's the right quantity of output for this firm to supply? Okay, and the answer is always going to be, in this case, it's always going to be, we want to choose the level of output where our profits are the greatest. Okay, so what that means is if you didn't have the profit function here, you would eyeball these two curves, the cost curve and the revenue curve, and try to look to see where the two curves are furthest apart. Okay, by drawing in the profit curve, you don't have to do that guesswork. So it's going to be somewhere around here, I think. Can you see the cursor?
I have a question.
Do you see the cursor though?
Yes.
Okay, good. So just one point, and then I'll take your question. So this vertical height here should be the same as this vertical distance there, because they're both measuring profit. Okay, what was your question?
Sorry. So I realize that the red line is the total revenue, and I understand that this is perfect competition, so it should be going at a horizontal line for the demand curve. But would
it's not horizontal, but it is straight.
Oh.
Horizontal would be flat.
For the demand curve for perfect?
Well, no. Okay. No, this total revenue curve comes from a horizontal demand curve. You're right about that.
Okay. So for total revenue, it's going up as you're producing more.
Correct.
Why wouldn't that be the case for any other thing that wasn't perfectly competitive?
And the reason why, it may be. Okay. The problem is, if you're, say, a monopoly and you want to sell more output, what do you have to do? You have to cut your price, because if you're the monopoly, you are the market. So you face a downward sloping demand curve.
Oh, okay.
So the only way to increase Q is to decrease P. And so it's not obvious whether your revenues are going to go up or go down.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll talk more about that next week.
Okay, I got it.
And hopefully Aaron will have sound then. Okay, so I like to start with this set of graphs, but frankly, they're harder to read. So it's usually easier if you switch to the marginal graphs. So what we have here is this horizontal line, which represents both marginal revenue and demand. Okay, the way the line is drawn here, the price is actually $4. You see it's a little below 5. Okay, so for every unit of output that they sell, they get $4. Okay, so when you have a straight line total revenue curve, you're always going to have a horizontal demand curve. Okay, now the marginal cost curve is the blue line, and marginal cost curves always look sort of U-shaped, but then they have a long tail. And so I prefer to think of that as kind of like a Nike sign. That's actually something that some students came up with. So was that a question? Somebody breathed. Okay, that's fine. So when you're looking at marginal revenue and marginal cost, finding the producer equilibrium is really easy because the rule is you want to choose the quantity where MR equals MC. And in this graph, it's pretty easy to see where those two curves intersect. It's at a quantity of 80. Okay, so if you were looking at the total revenue and total cost curve, the quantity of 80 is going to be the right answer. In other words, these curves should give you the same answer. There are two different ways to find it. And frankly, I find this one easier. Okay, any questions about that? Okay. Now, let's just move on here. Okay. Now, this graph actually has more stuff in it. It has our Nike sign-shaped marginal cost curve. It has the green demand and marginal revenue curve. But what we've also done here is we've added in the average cost curve, which is the blue U-shaped curve. Okay, and the reason why we did this is because you can actually calculate the profit that the firm is making with this graph. Let me show you how to do it. We start by defining something that we call the profit margin. The profit margin is essentially the average profit, okay? So the profit margin is always the difference between price and average cost, all right? So in this graph, if what you do is you pick a quantity, like say 40, and you go up and see what the price is, because the price comes off the demand curve, and you compare it to the average cost, and what you should be able to see here is that price is greater than average cost. Does that make sense?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Sure. Okay, let me actually type this in. Profit margin is price minus average cost. See that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you pick a quantity. Suppose we're at 40. Suppose we're producing 40 units of output. From that quantity, you go up to the demand curve and you read the price. Oh, the price is like $5 right there, which you can read here.
Okay.
Okay. Then you want to compare that $5 price to the average cost. So you do the same thing, but you read off the average cost curve, which is the blue line. So the average cost looks like it's about $3.75 if we just go over to here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but visually, you can see that demand is above average cost, which means that at that quantity of output, you're definitely making money because the profit margin is positive. Price is greater than average cost.
Okay.
Okay, now, let's go back to the original question, which was, how much are we going to produce? What's our producer equilibrium? Well, the answer for that is always where price, well, it's going to be at this point, right? Because you want to choose to operate where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So this is the marginal revenue curve. This is the marginal cost curve. For perfectly competitive firms, marginal revenue and price are the same thing. So you can look to see where the price intersects the marginal cost curve. So this is the right quantity right here. This is the quantity that's going to bring in the most profits. And if we draw our line down, it looks like 80 or a little bit above. Okay, now, what's the profit margin at this quantity? Well, we do it the same way, right? You go up to the demand curve, you read off the price, and you compare that to the average cost. So the profit margin at this quantity is going to be this vertical distance right here between the blue average cost line and the green price line or marginal revenue line. So what that means is for every unit of output that we're producing, that's how much profit we're making. That's the profit per unit of output. And what's our total profit going to be? Well, you take the profit margin, which is this vertical distance, and you multiply it times the number of units, and so you get this rectangle, this kind of slim rectangle that looks like this. The dimensions of the rectangle are going to be price minus average cost times quantity. Okay, now the way I got that, here's another way to do that. If this is the quantity that we're producing, what's our total revenue? Well, our total revenue is price, that's the vertical height here, times quantity. So if you think about this big rectangle, that's all the dollars that are coming into the firm. Okay, from the quantity up to the price line, and then all the way back to the origin here. Now, that's the revenues. What are the total costs? Well, you do it kind of the same way. You figure out what's the average cost. So you go up to the average cost line, and then you multiply it by the quantity. And so you get this lower rectangle that looks like about here. The difference between total revenues and total costs is the upper rectangle, which we identified a few minutes ago as the total profit. Okay, so visually, graphically, you can figure out what the total profit is this way. What I always do is I focus on the profit margin because that's really easy to see. Here's the price, here's the average cost. The price is greater than the average cost, we're making money. Okay, any questions about that?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Now, suppose demand falls for the product, and suppose the market price falls from $5 down to $3. Okay. We can switch over to this graph. See, the demand curve is now at $3. It was at $5. Now, this is a particularly interesting case because if you produce where you should to maximize profit, you produce where price or marginal revenue intersects the marginal cost curve. So it's going to be right here. This is the point, and the quantity looks like about, I don't know, 75 maybe. What's the profit margin at this quantity?
0.
Say it again.
Would it be 0?
It's 0 because the price just intersects average cost. So what that means is this firm is making 0 economic profits here. Okay, that's what we call the break-even point on these graphs. Okay, so if price equals average cost, you're just breaking even, and so you're making 0 economic profits. That's not actually as bad as it sounds, and we'll talk more about that later.
If it goes lower than that, like if the demand drops to like 2 or something like that, would
you mean like this graph?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's where you would choose to operate if you're going to stay in operation. Now what you have is the price is down here, but the average cost is above it. So average cost is greater than price. So you're actually making a loss here rather than a profit. So the good news is the best you can do is operate here. The bad news is you're losing money. But if you chose any other quantity, you would be losing even more.
In the real world, I guess, would that ever happen, or would the business?
Yes, it does. It does, and that I'm going to show you that next. Okay, you know, demand has seasonal fluctuations. Think about what happens during recession. During recessions, the economy slows down and demand for most everything declines, right? So when that happens, it may be that firms are losing money for a while. It doesn't mean they quit. What it means is they hope that things turn around before too long. Okay, and in fact, how do they manage to stay in business if they're losing money every year? This is an actual question, not a theoretical question. Do you understand the question?
Yeah, I get the question.
Okay. Well, think about your bank account. What's happening is every year your costs are greater than your revenues. So your bank account is going to start to fall, right?
Right.
As long as you've got money in the bank, you can stay in business. When your money runs out and your ability to borrow runs out, then you can't keep going at that point. So the number one reason why businesses go out of business is not bad management. What it is they don't have enough money in the bank, what we call working capital, to ride through the bad times.
Oh.
Okay, anybody have questions about that before I take it to the next level? All right. Now, let me see if I can, the problem is my tabs are behind this little Google Hangout thing. Here it is, I think. Yes. Okay. So how do you know if you should stay in operation and lose money, or if you should shut down, lay off all your workers and just close the doors? Okay, the answer is it depends on your average variable cost. And so in these graphs, we have the red average cost curve, and we have the green marginal cost curve, and we have the kind of purple demand curve, but I've also drawn in the average variable cost curve. Okay, what are variable costs?
Like wages for hourly workers.
Yeah, it is what you pay for your variable inputs. So it's labor and raw materials primarily. Okay, what else is there besides variable cost?
Fixed.
And your fixed cost would be your capital cost, like the rent on the factory. All right. So the rule says, as long as your price is above your average variable cost, and that's the case here, okay, let's see, here is where MR equals MC. You're losing money, the average cost curve is up here, but you're bringing in enough revenues to cover your variable costs and have a little bit left over. So what that means is you can pay your workers and you can pay your raw materials, and so the workers will continue to work, and your suppliers will continue to supply you. And then you have money, some money to make a partial rent payment. Okay. Is your landlord likely to shut you down immediately? The answer is no. They're likely to give you some time to see if you can make good on your rent contract. Okay, so the key point is this point right here, this intersection between marginal cost and average variable cost. Because that's called the shutdown point. If demand falls below that point, as it does over here on this graph, look at what's going on here, right? Here's where you would operate if you're operating anywhere. Not only are you losing money because here's the average cost curve, but you can't even pay your workers and suppliers, right? So in this situation, you will lose less money if you shut down and simply owe all the rent payments than if you continue to be in operation. Because if you continue to operate, let's assume for the fact that your workers will come back when you're not paying them, at least not paying them very much. If you continue to operate, you're going to owe all the rent and some of the wages and supply costs. So in that scenario, when demand is so low, you'll actually lose less money by shutting down at that point.
Just for my own clarification, the average cost is the combination of the variable and fixed costs?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. And that's why it's always above on the graph.
Okay.
Again, the way you read the graph is you pick a quantity and you go up.
Okay.
Okay, any questions? Good. So like I said before, next week, we're going to do exactly the same thing, look at very similar graphs, but look at it from a monopolies point of view. Just a little a teaser, all the cost curves are going to look the same. The only thing that's going to be different is the demand and marginal revenue curves. All right, so now let me see. Let's look at that next homework assignment. And here it is, assignment 7. Okay, the easiest way, actually the only way that I know to learn problem that I would like you to do with your groups. What you do is, and I walk you through every step of the way here, okay? It says, since perfectly competitive firms have zero market power, they must charge the going market price. So let's start this story at the market level. There's a market demand curve, which looks like a demand curve. There's a market supply curve that looks like a supply curve. And where they intersect is the market equilibrium. That intersection defines the market price. Okay, so the first thing you should do is draw the graph and label the various parts. Okay, now, next I want you to draw the graph, but not for the market, but rather for one firm, just like the graphs I showed you. And it makes sense to me if you align the two graphs horizontally. So like over here, you'd have your market graph, and then right next to it, you would have your firm graph. Okay, and then the market price that gets determined through the intersection of market supply and market demand over here, you just kind of extend back this way, and that's the demand curve for the typical firm. Okay, so all I want you to do is draw the market graph and draw the firm graph side by side. Okay, and then identify the equilibrium and you know, label the graph and things like that.
Were we just looking at firm graphs or market graphs?
We were looking at firm graphs.
Okay, so the market graph would just kind of be like
supply and demand.
Okay, yeah, like a random
regular supply and demand.
Okay.
Okay. Then what I want you to do, we'll skip this little part. This just asks you to think a little bit. Suppose there are 100 firms in the industry. What's the market equilibrium quantity going to be? What I want to do is show you kind of the
firm. Do you want us to base our firm price off of the market equilibrium? So
yes.
That firm price will be essentially a horizontal line.
Yes.
And
that's right.
It needs to be the same as the other graph. Okay.
Okay. Did I lose you?
No, I'm good. Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
I just want to make sure.
All right. So then what I want to do is I want to, sorry?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure the prices had to match.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's easier that way because what we're going to do is you're going to see how things that happen at the market level affect the firm and vice versa, sort of. Okay. So suppose there's an increase in the market demand for the product. Okay. Show what happens on the market graph to equilibrium price and quantity. If there's an increase in market demand, what's going to happen to the price? This is a real question for you guys.
It's going to go up.
It's going to go up, right? So then what you need to do on the firm graph is say, okay, suppose the price goes up. How do we respond to that? Okay, so how does this change in demand affect the individual firm? What happens to the firm's equilibrium? What happens to the price and equilibrium quantity? Okay, what I want you to do then is draw the new graph on top of the old graph so that I can see the original and the new one on the same axes, so it's easy to compare what happened from the original to the new.
Okay.
Okay, then suppose the firm was just breaking even at the original equilibrium quantity. Redraw your original graph of the firm, adding an average total cost curve to show zero economic profit. We did that earlier today. Now redraw the new producer equilibrium on the latest graph and show the areas of total revenue, total cost, and profit at the new equilibrium quantity. If demand goes up, this is, now I'm talking to you guys, if demand goes up and price goes up, what's going to happen to profit?
It's going to go up.
It's going to go from 0 to something positive. Yeah, it's going to go up. And so I want you to be able to sketch out where's the total revenue, where's the total cost, and where's the profit. Okay, and then the last part is taking you an equilibrium. We start at an equilibrium demand, and now we've got a new short run equilibrium. So I'm asking, what will happen in the long run to a perfectly competitive industry in this situation? What will happen to the number of firms? What will happen to the market supply? What will happen to the profit for the typical firm? And then I want you to basically spell it out. Okay, so what I say here is, in some I want 4 graphs, and I just repeat what I said with more verbiage up above. Okay, doing a problem like this is what you need to be able to do for all the market structures. But this week we're just doing it with perfect competition.
Okay.
Okay. Now, when do you want it due? We can make it due whenever you want, but if you go too far into next week, you're going to run into, you know, other work that we need to do. Okay. If you were asking me, I would say let's make it due on Wednesday before the Hangout. But like I said, we can pick a different day if that's what you would prefer. So what do you think?
I'm good with Wednesday. Just not
Yeah.
this Friday.
Wednesday worked fine for me.
Oh, that sounds like Henry. When did you come in,
Yep.
Henry? Oh my gosh.
I showed up late just because we had
Henry,
trouble
you're
getting a hold of the Hangout.
behind you. Okay, well,
Yeah, you kind of buzzed out.
okay, so we'll make it due next Wednesday.
All right.
Great. Thank you.
And so what you need to do is contact your group and get started on this. It takes a little time to get into the swing of things. And if you have questions or problems, just shoot me an email and I can help.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
So does anybody have any other questions?
There we go.
I'm good.
Hearing none, I guess it's time for me to cook dinner.
Mhm.
So I will see you guys next week, if not sooner.
All right.
All right.